Jesus' teaching on lay up treasures in heaven. If you want to know a passage that speaks about the distinct nature of a Christian in society today, this is certainly one of those. This is up there with me with the love your enemies passage as something that is uniquely Christian. That is something that should cause us to stand out instead of blend in. So we're going to look at the Christian and Materialism here. Just as a recap, the previous 18 verses of chapter 6, Jesus talks about the hypocrites and their selfishness. So their prayers, their piety, their giving was all wrapped up in their own self-image. They wanted to be praised. They wanted to be seen by others. And then he shifts to the Gentiles, who think that they can persuade God with many words. And so their prayers are more marked by mindlessness, not thoughtfulness, as it should. And so, in contrast, the Christian prayer is God-centered and intelligent. And so now we're moving from our internal piety, so looking at our internal relationship with God through prayer, but now looking at our relationship with the world. And so before was our relationship with God, now we're shifting to our relationship with the world. And we're going to see there's two treasures. We have instruction on where to lay them. We have two visions on where to fix our eyes, and we have two masters on whom we are to choose. So in each of these sections, we have a clear contrast. There's no middle ground. There's no sitting on the fence. There's no 1 foot in, 1 foot out. You have two clear decisions and options before you. And so let me read this passage again, verses 19 through 24. And it says, Jesus says this, he says, "Do not lay up for yourselves treasures on earth, where moth and rust destroy, and where thieves break in and steal. But lay up for yourselves treasures in heaven, where neither moth nor rust destroys, and where thieves do not break in and steal. For where your treasure is, there your heart will be also. The eye is the lamp of the body. So if your eye is healthy, your whole body will be full of light. But if your eye is bad, your whole body will be full of darkness. If then the light in you is darkness, how great is the darkness? No one can serve two masters, for either he will hate the one and love the other, or he will be devoted to the one and despise the other. You cannot serve God and money." So Jesus begins with many different contrasts here, and he begins in verses 19 through 20 with this laying up of treasure. So what are the two options that Jesus gives us for laying up treasures? What are the two locations? You have option 1, you can lay up your treasures on earth, and option 2, you can lay them up in heaven. All right, what characterizes treasures that are laid up in earth? Material things. Yeah, so this could be material things. What characterizes them, though? What does Jesus say about the treasure? What will happen to it? It gets destroyed. So it's corruptible, right? Over time, whether someone steals it, whether moth eats it, whether you misplace it, it's corruptible, which means it is temporary, right? Now, I doubt many of you have had your clothing destroyed by moths. Maybe you have. I feel like we've solved that problem in 2026. Maybe you've had somebody steal from you. But even if you had all of your stuff locked up in a bank somewhere, in a secure area, there's things that still steal and corrupt your belongings. One, inflation, right? Even now, the money that you put in 10 years ago in a savings account, if you didn't put it in investments, is worth less today than it was 10 years ago because of inflation. So even if you think about our own current context, if you just hoard all this stuff, it eventually loses its value. Now, compare this to heaven. So we're called to lay up our treasures in heaven. We'll talk about what those treasures might be, but what's the difference between the treasures in heaven and the treasures in earth? They're eternal. So they're not temporary, but they're eternal. And why are they eternal? Yeah.
When you do your works for Him, they don't go away.
Mm-hmm. Because heaven's a secure place, right? So it's incorruptible. If heaven is a place where there's no corruption, there's no evil, if there's no things that are working against you, then the reasons to say that if heaven's eternal, it's a place of endless blessing and good, then the treasures you lay up in heaven will also be treasures that are incorruptible. They will not pass away. They will not diminish in value. If anything, the opposite will probably be true, that they will actually increase in value and blessing over time. So you have your two options. You can either lay up your treasures on earth, where moth and rust can destroy it, or thieves can break in and steal, and it's corruptible and it's temporary. Even if you make it to the end of life and you think that you've protected all of your things, it's all going to end up at Goodwill or in your kid's attic, and they don't want it. Trust you, they don't want it. If my parents are listening to this, we don't want it. You know? And it will rot in your attic. Yeah, exactly. You don't want it either. Or you can't take any of it with you, right? You know, you might be able to leave some, temporary blessing to your kids behind you, which is good. And there's a wise way to do that. But ultimately, it's going to be corruptible by the same ways. But if you live your life laying up your treasures in heaven, you will have an inheritance and a reward that earth cannot take away, that nobody can come in and steal. So, according to verse 21, what connection exists between a person's treasure and their heart? What was that? Say it louder. I didn't hear it. Can you repeat? I didn't hear you. I'm sorry. No. If you meant keep it in the head, that's fine.
Well, to me, the things I value, that's where I'm at. So I don't value much here on this earth. I value my purpose. And my heart's up there at Jesus. It's my goal is where I want to go. I don't necessarily want to stay here with this stuff.
Yeah.
But on earth, the treasures become more important.
Like the reality is what he's arguing here is that the location of your treasure dictates the focus of your heart.
Yeah.
So if you've ever, not that y'all let me do this, but if it wouldn't even be me, but if you would let somebody look at your bank account, your transactions, what you spent money on this past year, the years before, if someone did not know you and they just looked at what you spent money on, they can tell you what you love. Typically, they can tell you, I'm putting my money here. This means I enjoy these things. And you can find out what someone loves.
Well, they know I don't.
Yeah, no, I get it, but little or not, it's not about the amount. It's about where the treasure you are. He doesn't say, he doesn't categorize how big your treasure is. He says wherever you lay it up. And so your bank account reveals a lot about what your heart's loving. So I think if you always wanted to do an audit on your spiritual life, look at how am I spending my money? Am I being stingy with it? Am I being greedy with it? Am I being generous with it? All those different things. So, I got something in my throat. Jesus then shifts his metaphor here in verse 22 for the body. What is the metaphor he uses in verse 22? Yeah, the eye is a lamp of the body. What does a lamp do? It brings light. Yeah, illuminates. So in this situation, this illustration, your eye is a lamp. And what is your body? Well, I guess your body is your body. So a lamp is typically placed in a house, right? And so you think about a lamp brings light to a whole house. And so in this illustration, your eye functions as the lamp or the entryway to your body, right? And so the whole body, the whole person is pictured as a room or a house. The purpose of the eye is to illuminate this room to ensure it's all full of light. The eye thus serves as a source of light for the body. Now verse 22 through 23 he expands on this, and he gives two different conditions and two different outcomes. So what is the condition? So if your eye is what? Healthy, then what's the result? Full of light. If your eye is bad, then your body will be full of darkness.
You know, that old saying is true, that eyes are the windows to the soul. As you can see, light or darkness in a person in the eye.
I think a lot of times, where you set your eyes on also reveals your heart, And so, like, to set your eyes upon something, scripturally speaking, is also to set your heart upon it. And so, certainly, if you're setting your eyes upon Christ and light, the work of the Spirit, the Word, that's going to affect all of your spiritual health. But if you set your eyes and your desires on things that are evil and dark, in context here, materialism, right, is going to affect not just your relationship with the material world, but also spiritual.
It also comes out in your speech.
Yeah, your heart, out of the overflow of your heart. Yep. So according to verse 24, why is it impossible to serve two different masters? Yeah, can't love both. Can't have two wives, can't have two husbands, right? Can't have two masters.
God made
You can't do two jobs at once.
Yeah.
Do better at one than the other.
So God made money, and if you're trying to serve, you're serving something that God created, so the creator.
What was that? Sorry.
God made money, He created money.
Yeah.
And money in itself is not evil, it's how you react to money.
Yeah.
So when you start making money your focus, you're serving the created instead of the creator.
Yeah, you're committing idolatry. Yeah. But money is a unique idolatry, it's a unique thing because Jesus compares it as a master here. So what are the two specific masters he names? He names God and money. So let's figure out what all this means. So you have three different illustrations. They're all talking about a relationship with material goods. And so verse 20, he encourages us to lay up treasures in heaven. What does that mean practically? What do you think that means? I think we have an idea of what it means to lay up earthly treasures. Gaining your wealth, buying a lot of trinkets and cool things that are eventually going to depreciate in value, you can't take with you. I think that's clear. But what does it mean to store heavenly treasures?
I think it's our works.
Okay.
It's what we do for Christ. And probably more specifically, spreading the gospel, but how we take care of people.
Okay.
Because it said, Paul said one time, or I guess it was Paul, that if somebody comes up to you and they don't have food to eat, and you just pray for them, and when you've got money to help them get food to eat, then you are very wrong. They're not feeding them.
Yeah.
But to me, that's when Jesus says, you do the least of my brethren, you do it also to me. But to me, that's where I put my focus on my treasures.
So certainly our good works, even what he's laid out here in the Sermon on the Mount, those all have eternal value. What else?
I put down prayer, devotion, and obedience to God.
Yeah. Let's get prayer, devotion, and obedience to God. All hidden things. Right? All things that you're like, prayer is certainly an act of faith. Obedience to God is certainly an act of faith. Oftentimes, those acts of faith don't result in great blessing all the time in this life. But you're storing up these hidden treasures later on. Yeah. What else? Anything you do to help cultivate your own Christian character or cultivate it in somebody else's life, that is eternal, like the fruits of the Spirit, like you actually growing in maturity as a work of the Spirit will be brought to completion in heaven, which means it is eternal. Any way that you're able to serve somebody and share the gospel with them and help them walk with Jesus in their life today is eternal treasures that will not run away, will not go away. And so it seems that it's anything that will be, when this earth passes away, anything that will still be present in heaven is what we kind of have this idea, which is your faith, your character, the good that you've done for your brother and sister. Is Jesus saying we can't store up Is Jesus saying we can't have a savings account? Is he saying we can't have a retirement account? Yeah. Where's the line?
Seek and follow your savings account. You seek and follow Christ.
Yeah.
And all your attention is on building that money, how you're going to get it, how you're going to keep it, who's going to get it.
Yeah.
You work 7 days a week.
Yeah.
And you don't ration out your time to God and have a balance in your life. Because money in itself is not evil.
Yeah. Proverbs says it's a
When you
wonderful thing.
treat it the way you love it, what you do with it, can be evil.
Yeah. Yeah, so I think the line is not an amount. It's not like, once you reach $100,000 in savings or whatever that is, or retirement, then now you're storing up treasures and you keep it up. So it's not, we can't be legalistic like that. But I think what Willie said is where is your heart and your attention being focused in? People with little can be as greedy as people with much. They can be as consumed with greed. It comes out in different ways. It comes out in covetousness. They're coveting what someone else has, and what happens is their eyes are still on money and possessions. It might not be their possessions, it's on someone else's eyes, but guess what? Their hearts and their mind are still consumed with the very thing that led the billionaire to become a billionaire, right? It's just different. Yeah, keeping up with the Joneses, that's right, yeah. And so, if you read, this is where we have to read all things in context, all in Proverbs, the scripture commends the ant who stores up food for the summer, so there's some wisdom to storing up, leaving an inheritance for your children, but as we've seen here, where is your heart in the midst of that? So why does Jesus say that your heart follows your treasure rather than your treasure following your heart?
We tend to focus on the run to our earthly treasures versus living God first.
Yeah.
If you focus on God, they say these things and all this will be added into you. So if you focus on God, He already knows what you need. It also says when you walk in the righteous way, He'll give you the desires of your heart. But when you become more Christ-like, the desires of your heart changes. It changes. People would go, I want to live in town, I want this and that, and then when you get, instead of Jesus, the focus is to be more like Jesus, to know more about Him, to be more obedient, to do this, that would be the desires of my heart.
Yeah. And so I think there's actually two things that I think Jesus is saying here. He said, yes, one, where you put your treasure reveals your heart. And so when I'm spending money on, you can retroactively look back and be like, hey, I spent a lot of money on Clemson football this year. Maybe I cared too much about Clemson football. I did not go to Clemson football game this year. Too expensive. But that was the first thing that came to my mind. And then, or where you're spending your money, your heart will also follow. And so it's eventually your heart will follow what you're spending your money on. And so, because you're giving your attention and your focus to that very thing. So that thing might not have your heart yet, but eventually, if you keep spending towards it, it eventually grabs onto your heart. So it's kind of both hands, where it's, hey, your treasure reveals where your heart is, but also where you're spending your money drags your heart to that very thing and follows it.
I break down that what we want, love, and desire, we will continually strive for it.
Yes, what we love. Yeah. You replace all those words with one word, it's what we worship. Yeah, So this metaphor, this is actually a little tricky here in verses 22 through 23. There's a lot of different ways you could take this metaphor of healthy good eye, like this bad unhealthy eye. What do y'all think Jesus is talking about here with the eye and health and the condition of it? Said what? Yeah, absolutely, yeah. There's actually a Jewish saying during this time. So if you look up some cultural context, for someone to say you have a good eye, is meaning that you have like a single-minded devotion to God, which shows itself in generosity to others. And so if someone sees you being generous, they will say, oh, that person has a good eye, which means because that person's focused on God, he's generous to other people. But if they see you being stingy and greedy and withholding, they say, oh, that person has a bad eye, which means he's either being short-sighted or his devotion is split in different ways. And so Jesus is saying that how you relate to your material possessions, are you stingy with it and envy other people's stuff, or are you generous with it, reveals the light and darkness of your whole spiritual life, that it's a litmus test of where you are spiritually mature. So test it out where it's like, hey, if I'm generous, if I'm being generous, or I'm pulled towards generosity, that's a good sign of my spiritual maturity. But if I'm constantly being pulled towards hoarding and greed and selfishness, then that also reflects your spiritual maturity there. Why is money being singled out as a direct master to God rather than just a tool? What does money promise you that's different than maybe a different thing that's created by God? Security. Prestige. So popularity, prestige, security. Yeah, it promises you security. It can promise you freedom. You're very wealthy, man. This person who's in debt is slave to the lender. Title, identity, power. If you have money, you can have power, right? If you have money, you can have freedom. If you have money, you can have eyes on you. You can buy and do what you want. Ultimately, it demands your trust. Jesus frames money as a spiritual rival because you cannot surrender ultimate allegiance to two competing authorities simultaneously. So we don't. You might have worked multiple jobs in your life. I certainly have. Or this is actually the first time in my life I haven't had like 2 or 3 jobs at once. And so, but this is not the same as like working multiple jobs. To have a master is not to say you have 2 different employers. A master in that time had authority over all of your life. It wasn't just, oh, you work for 8 hours for him, and then as long as your schedules don't overlap, you can work for 4 hours over here. That's not what is happening here. This is actually, you can either have one master or no masters. So you can't serve money and God, since to serve one is to exclude the other. And so that's what he's saying there. Is
money is the root of all evil.
Love of money. The love of money is the root of all evil. And man, everybody loves it.
You put your trust. You either trust God or you trust your money.
Yeah.
Right.
My mind goes to I don't know if you feel lack monetarily. I think all of us would say, oh, we wish we had a little bit more buffer in our budget, maybe a little bit more nice things. I remember my mind always goes back to the rich young ruler who comes to Jesus, and he's rich and young, wants entrance into the kingdom of God, and Jesus looks at him and says, Jesus loved him and said, you lack one thing. That when you look at, Jesus looks at this man, he seemingly has everything. He has the reputation, he has the money, he's rich, he has authority, and Jesus looks at him and says, you lack one thing. Go sell all you have and give to the poor, come follow me. Whereas oftentimes I look at people with far more wealth than me, far more things, and think that I lack because I have less than them, when in reality my faith has to come in and recognize that what I have in Christ far outweighs what can be earned and achieved here in this earth. And so Jesus doesn't look at me and says, oh, Addison, you lack. He looks at someone who's trusting in their money and might have much of it and says, you lack. And what he does, he looks Jesus in the face, he walks away sad, but with all of his possessions. He leaves, he still has everything, but then he walks away sad because of what Jesus said to him. So I think it's a good reminder for us that though you might feel like you lack materially, whatever that might be for you, that we have a treasure in heaven that is incorruptible, that will last forever. So just let's spend our focus and our time focusing on that treasure which moth and rust cannot destroy.
Jesus didn't pursue him either. He
Yeah.
let him go on his way.
Absolutely. I think that's my kids screaming.